The birth of a dictator, Hitler's early days. Adolf Hitler's path to power began in the turmoil of post-World War I Germany. The year was 1919. Germany, defeated and humiliated, was a breeding ground for resentment and extremism. Amidst this chaos, a young, disgruntled veteran named Adolf Hitler found his calling. He joined the German Workers' Party, a small, insignificant group that would later become the infamous Nazi Party. Hitler, with his fiery rhetoric and passionate nationalism, quickly rose through the ranks. He possessed a charismatic presence that drew in disillusioned veterans and disgruntled citizens alike. The seeds of a dark future were sown. Hitler's early speeches were full of anger and resentment. He blamed the Jews and the communists for Germany's defeat in the Great War. His words resonated with many Germans who were struggling to come to terms with their nation's defeat and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler offered them a scapegoat, someone to blame for their suffering. The German Workers' Party, under Hitler's leadership, was quickly gaining notoriety. Hitler's message was simple, yet powerful. Germany had been betrayed by its own people, the Jews, the communists, and the weak politicians who had surrendered to the Allies. He promised to restore Germany to its former glory, to tear up the Treaty of Versailles, and to make Germany a great power once again. His words, laced with venom and vitriol, struck a chord with a population hungry for answers and desperate for change. The early 1920s saw the Nazi Party, with Hitler at its helm, grow in strength and numbers. Their rallies became larger, their message more radical, and their appeal more widespread. Germany, still reeling from its defeat and struggling with economic instability, provided fertile ground for Hitler's poisonous ideology to take root. The stage was set for a dramatic power grab that would have devastating consequences for Germany and the world. Trial by fire. The Beer Hall Putsch and its aftermath. In 1923, Hitler and his followers, emboldened by their growing popularity, attempted to seize power in Munich. This event, known as the Beer Hall Putsch, was a poorly planned coup d'etat that ended in failure. Hitler and his co-conspirators stormed a meeting of Bavarian government leaders, hoping to spark a nationwide revolution. However, their plan backfired spectacularly. The police were alerted and a shootout ensued. The putsch was a disaster for Hitler and the Nazi Party. 16 Nazis and 4 police officers were killed in the confrontation. Hitler himself was arrested and charged with treason. The Nazi Party was banned, and its future seemed uncertain. However, the failed coup proved to be a turning point for Hitler. It provided him with a national platform and an opportunity to spread his message to a wider audience. The trial of Adolf Hitler captivated the German public. Hitler used the courtroom as a stage to promote his nationalist agenda. He delivered impassioned speeches denouncing the Weimar Republic and calling for a strong, unified Germany. Although found guilty of treason, Hitler received a lenient sentence of 5 years in prison. He only served 9 months, but during that time he wrote his infamous autobiography and political manifesto, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. The Beer Hall Putsch, though a failure, had inadvertently given Hitler the notoriety and publicity he craved. It had transformed him from an obscure rabble-rouser into a national figure. Imprisonment, rather than silencing him, had given him a platform and time to formulate his ideology. The stage was now set for Hitler to exploit the weaknesses of the Weimar Republic and lead his party to power through more cunning and calculated means. Mein Kampf, a blueprint for power. During his brief imprisonment in Landsberg prison, Hitler penned Mein Kampf, a rambling, hate-filled diatribe that outlined his political ideology and his vision for Germany. This book, a combination of autobiography, political manifesto, and anti-Semitic rant, would become the Bible of the Nazi movement. In Mein Kampf, Hitler railed against the Jews, whom he blamed for all of Germany's ills. He called for their extermination, a chilling foreshadowing of the horrors to come. Mein Kampf laid bare Hitler's twisted worldview. He espoused a crude form of social Darwinism, arguing that the Aryan race was superior to all others and destined to rule the world. He called for the creation of a greater German Reich, which would encompass all German-speaking peoples and provide the necessary living space, Lebensraum, for the Aryan race to flourish. This expansionist ambition would have disastrous consequences for Germany's neighbors. The book, initially ignored by many, became a bestseller after Hitler's rise to power. It was translated into numerous languages and became required reading in Nazi Germany. Mein Kampf provided the ideological foundation for the Nazi regime. It justified the persecution of Jews, the suppression of political opponents, and the relentless drive for German expansionism. Mein Kampf was a blueprint for disaster. It offered a vision of Germany cleansed of its enemies, a Germany that would dominate Europe and eventually the world. This dangerous ideology, fueled by Hitler's charisma and the desperation of the German people, would have catastrophic consequences for millions of people. Section 4. Depression and despair, fertile ground for extremism. The Wall Street crash of 1929 and the ensuing Great Depression created the perfect conditions for Hitler's rise to power. As the German economy collapsed, millions were thrown out of work. Hunger, poverty, and despair gripped the nation. The Weimar Republic, already fragile and unstable, seemed unable to cope with the crisis. This economic and social turmoil played directly into Hitler's hands. The Nazis exploited the widespread fear and uncertainty, offering simplistic solutions to complex problems. They blamed the Jews, the communists, and the liberal Weimar government for the economic crisis. Their message resonated with a desperate population looking for someone to blame and someone to offer hope. The Nazi Party, with its promises of national revival and economic salvation, saw its popularity surge. Their paramilitary wing, the Sturmabteilung, known as the Brown Shirts, terrorized political opponents, disrupted their meetings, and created an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. The streets of German cities became battlegrounds as the Nazis clashed with communists and other political enemies. This climate of violence and instability further eroded public confidence in the Weimar Republic and made Hitler's message of order and strength all the more appealing. As the crisis deepened, more and more Germans turned to the Nazis as the only viable alternative. The Nazis, with their disciplined organization, their powerful propaganda machine, and their message of hope and hatred, were well positioned to capitalize on the despair of the times. The Great Depression had transformed the Nazi Party from a fringe group into a major political force, poised to seize power. Section 5. The Politics of Fear, Hitler's Rise to Prominence. The early 1930s witnessed the steady rise of the Nazi Party in German politics. In the 1930 elections, the Nazis won 107 seats in the Reichstag, becoming the second largest party in Germany. This electoral success shocked the establishment and demonstrated the growing appeal of Hitler's message. The Nazis had tapped into a deep well of resentment and anger, skillfully exploiting the economic crisis and the political instability to their advantage. Hitler, with his fiery rhetoric and his promises of national salvation, had become a figure of national prominence. His speeches, broadcast on the radio and amplified through loudspeakers, reached millions of Germans. He offered a seductive vision of a strong, proud Germany, cleansed of its enemies and restored to its rightful place in the world. The Nazis used a combination of intimidation and persuasion to silence their opponents. They employed violence and terror against their political enemies, while simultaneously appealing to the fears and prejudices of the German people. Their propaganda was relentless, portraying Hitler as a messianic figure who would lead Germany out of darkness and into a new era of prosperity and greatness. The Weimar Republic, weakened by internal divisions and paralyzed by the economic crisis, proved unable to resist the Nazi onslaught. The traditional political parties, discredited and outmaneuvered, seemed powerless to stop Hitler's relentless march to power. The stage was set for the final act in this tragedy, the appointment of Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of Germany.